this program, Program 1, had been steady attainment of clean audit on predetermined objectives over the years, if I'm not mistaken, 6 or 7 years in sequence. With regards to the next bar is Program 2, Social Welfare Services. It mainly caters for elderly and persons with disabilities, whom we know were still restricted at the time of reporting. Their movement were restricted at the time, hence the 56% achievement, while 36% of the commitments were rated as good performance. Program 3, as we know it, is mainly children and families, and we know also their services were hindered by the pandemic, especially the then ECDs were largely impacted by both the pandemic and municipal bylaws, hence the 58%. Even the 3% that you see on top there, the red part implying not achieved, was attributed to non-center-based program that could not comply with health and safety directives before they can be allowed to operate. Looking at Program 4, restorative services, which we know that it was very, very key in addressing the collateral damage that was caused by the pandemic, with focus on crime prevention, victim empowerment, and anti-substance abuse. The program was very, very responsive at 97%. Even the 3% deviation, Honorable Chair, MEC, members and colleagues, the 3% that you are seeing there was due to the termination of secure care contract during the reporting period. Otherwise, this program could have recorded, or technically it's at 100%. It basically stood the test of COVID, and we do not anticipate any regression, Honorable Chairperson, towards attaining the strat plan target. Looking at Program 5, we all know it was highly responsive. It was a shock absorber, providing food relief to those in dire need in the midst of disaster. Despite the heightened need and challenges on other areas, Honorable Chairperson, 91% of the commitments in Program 5 were attained, and the department will continue to address the deficiencies on school uniform, dignity packs, food relief, as well as cooperatives. Next slide. This is the overall performance. It stood at 73% at the end of the reporting period. The second bar on the right basically reflects the weighted performance. Weighted performance, we basically mean, is inclusive of all the other levels that rated 99% downward. So the 73% is those commitments that were 100% and above achieved. Next. This slide, Honorable Chair, MEC, HOD, members and colleagues, it basically depicts performance per program over the past 4 years. Notable with this trend in 21-22, Honorable Chairperson, was a significant improvement across all the core programs, Programs 2 to 5. Notable is Program 4 and 5. They were an all-time high. As you can see, the peak. I've already stated the challenges, the challenging dynamics regarding Program 1 trend. I will now reflect on how we fared on both GGT and MTSF 5-year priorities. As we know, our contribution is on National Pillar 1, is the one that speaks to economy and jobs. And our contribution as a department is through the co-ops, EPWP, and welfare to work. So the greens and light greens confirm we are on the right track. as 60% of commitments were attained and 33% recorded good performance. On our core pillar on the right, pillar 4, we are also on track at 76%. We just need to address the deficiencies on school uniform, dignity packs, as well as bylaws compliance issues that impact on provision of daily meals. They are the ones that constitute the amber red part, implying poor progress. Next. Same interventions will also be applied on GGT provincial priorities to change the amber red areas that you are seeing on the graph. Next. Looking at how each sub-program fared, on program 2, social welfare services, older persons, the emphasis is on improving the attendance in service centers and luncheon clubs, noting the lifting of COVID-19 restrictions. On the far right is performance on social relief recommendations, as the department were mainly recommending to SASSA. They were also impacted by the pandemic. Also, Honorable Chairperson, to note is that SASSA focus at the time was more on COVID-related grants than social relief of distress. 22. With regards to program 3, children and families, in the main, Honorable Chair, the program attained most of its commitments with challenges noted on foster care due to dependencies encountered with courts as well as ECD compliance issues, especially in Tshwane, Honorable Chair. The department continued to capacitate the affected ECDs to meet compliance status for registration. 25. Program 4, restorative services, as indicated earlier, the red under crime prevention was due to retrieval of secure care center services during the reporting period. They were retrieved in the third quarter. So the planned performance of the then funded was already paused. 80. As to program 5, development and research, emphasis towards achieving the 5-year MTSF target is very, very key there in terms of addressing the backlog on school uniform and dignity packs. Also noted there is the heightened need for food relief. 84. With regards to social infrastructure, Chair, MEC and HOD, 2 facilities were concluded during the reporting period. That is Devon ECD and office accommodation in Harankwa Child and Youth Care Center. The department further intends to complete the construction of Beckersdal Social Integrated Facility and Bantu Bonke ECD in the next financial year, 23-24. The rest of the facilities, Chair, the Ratanda shelter and the planned rehab facilities in Sebokeng, Soshanguve, and Tembisa are still at planning stage. Looking at the department human capacity, Chair, MEC, HOD, and members, we had 5,961 posts at the end of 21-22. Of those, about 90% of the posts were filled and 10% were vacant. Just to note, 75% of department officials, Chair, are women, 36% youth, and 4% are persons with disabilities. Honorable Chairperson, there were 1,633 terminations in the reporting period, of which 1,442 were contracts, and the rest were those who migrated with the ECD function to GDE. We also contracted 1,910 staff in line with the stimulus allocation. 310 were newly appointed staff in the department. Also to note, there was one official that was placed on precautionary suspension. With regards to governance responses to oversight, Honorable Chairperson, MEC, HOD, and members, in total, there were 11 resolutions that were received and managed from legislature during the reporting period. They were all responded to with mitigations outlined where required, and there hasn't been any follow-ups from the committee. 45. Same applies to petitions. There were 5 in total that were managed by the department and all were responded to. We further adequately, Chairperson, responded to the 9 AG Auditor General and 1 Public Service Commission request as per expectation. In terms of GOD imperatives, the department redressed interventions across programs. As you can see, the disaggregation cuts across all programs from Program 1 to Program 5 in support of persons with disabilities. They included mainstreaming, supporting and promoting their rights, well-being and socio-economic empowerment through the funded protective workshops, as well as procurement spend. I've already alluded to these challenges, Honorable Chairperson. We'll now briefly share the challenges that hindered our performance. Key were procurement directives that caused delays on dignity packs and school uniform. The services were temporarily put on hold due to a constitutional court ruling. I suppose the CFO will further expatiate and share status on that. In conclusion, there were no requests for interventions by legislature from the department during the reporting period, Honorable Chair. The next slides, Honorable Chairperson, relates to areas that deviated below the 80% threshold as defined by AG. And I've already articulated most of them. Notable, Honorable Chair, is the deviation imposed by dependencies to other sectors. For example, foster care, it remains a challenge as more often there are no clearly defined and properly institutionalized value chain processes between and within different government departments. As a result of this collaborative and interdependent nature of the service, the department will then be compromised, resulting to partial attainment of targets if other departments do not deliver on their commitments. The department, Honorable Chair, however, continue engaging with stakeholders, including national and presiding officers at the Department of Justice. With regards to monitoring of NPOs, Honorable Chair, as we are aware, bulk of our services are currently rendered by NPOs. In total, 2,856 NPOs were funded and supported during the reporting period, and 1,424 were capacitated on governance matters as well as technical aspects, just to enable them to deliver the mandate of the department more effectively. So, as I conclude, Honorable Chair, these are some of the success stories drawn from the beneficiaries. As part of the Youth Month commemoration events, the department launched the Ikusasa-led Center of Excellence in June 2021 with the aim to link rehabilitated substance users and youth at risk to training and other livelihood opportunities. Lastly, Honorable Chair, MEC and members, Another milestone that was noted when the department partnered with the South African Defence Force to establish a beauty academy at Lenasia Army Base, which is now fully operational and is trained 40 young people since it commenced on hair and beauty related skills. I will now request to pause Honorable Chairperson, MEC, members and colleagues to allow the CFO to complement this presentation with the financials. Thank you.
You can proceed, CFO.
A very good morning, Honourable Chairperson, Honourable Members, MEC, HOD, colleagues and distinguished guests. Honourable Chair, thanks for the opportunity. I think we're just going to quickly run through. I think you've made some opening remarks with regards to the spending. Looking at the first slide that we're indicating just per our various programs, how we performed. Under Program 1 for administration, we were at 100%. Program 2, we also achieved 100% spending. On program number 3, which was children and families, we were at 97%. Restorative services, 100%. And then development and research program 5, we were at 96%. With the overall then spent of the 98%, as you've indicated, Honourable Chair, the 2% that was not spent at the end of the financial year. The overall budget was 6.1 billion, and of that we spent 6 billion with 122 million that was then not spent. If we move then to the next slide, that then outlines just the reasons for the underspending. In essence, mainly focusing then on program 3 on this slide, there was funds with regards to compensation of employees that was allocated by National Department of Social Development. The budget that we received was initially done on a 10-month period of appointing social workers. By the time that we received the funds, we in essence only had 4 months left. So we had to try and upscale the numbers to try and catch up with the budget allocation, which in essence at the end left us with not being able to fully spend those funds. The funds also was quite specific with regards to its allocation in the sense of only being able to appoint social workers. So there was no room for us then to also look at other complementing areas within the environment to appoint additional staff. Then under the non-profit institutions was mainly the allocation that was also coming from National Department with regards to the ECD Employment Stimulus Relief Fund, where we underspent by 64 million. This was mainly due to rejections that was caused and unverified bank accounts where ECD centres are registered as companies, partnerships and other forms of businesses other than NPOs. So we were not able to then finalise on the payments. The budget allocation was made on the number of applications received. So if you then had rejections, you were then not in a position to finalise those payments. On the next slide, then looking at Program 5, Development and Research, the allocated budget was for dignity packs, where we underspent. These were also specific earmarked allocations that could not then be reallocated. And then there was also 2.3 million underspent on NPOs. But in essence, it did not have any impact with regards to the planned programs for implementation under the program. And I think, as Ms. Mashangwane has indicated, that's one of our key focus areas is then to resolve the challenges around school uniform and dignity packs. If we then move to the next slide, that just gives it per economic classification. You would see that for compensation of employees, we were at 99%.
Sorry, CFO, the slide seems not to be moving. I think we are still stuck on that page 70. If you can just move the slides so that we can see.
Okay. Chair, so that's slide 73. So compensation of employees then at 99%, goods and services 97%. Then if we move down to the non-profit institutions at 98%, and 99% for buildings and other fixed structures. So in essence, under compensation of employees that relates to those social workers that we didn't spend fully was the 22 million. Looking at goods and services, which is mainly made up of the dignity packs, is 32 million that was unspent. The 66 million under the non-profits is 64 relating to the ECD presidential stimulus, and then the additional 2 that was sitting under program 5, development and research. And then there was 1.2 million with regards to the infrastructure budget that was not spent due to delays in the finalization of some of those projects. The next slide then, in essence, just indicates the same reasons as I've highlighted just now. And I think on ECD, I've already unpacked in the previous slides as well with regards to what the key aspects there was there. Moving then to our conditional grant allocation, the ECD center maintenance, we were able to spend 98% of the allocated budget of 5 million. With only 113,000 that was not spent. ECD subsidy expansion, we were able to spend 100% on the expansion. The employment stimulus relief fund, you would then see that the allocation was 103 million for the financial year. 39 million was spent within the unspent funds of 64 million, with 38% spent on the employment stimulus. With regards to the incentive grant, we also then fully spent 18 million of the allocated budget in that regard. The overall performance there was 77% performance on the ECD conditional grants. The next slide then just touches quickly on the sub-programs with regards to NPO funding. You would see under the ECD and partial care is where the bulk of that is sitting with regards to the 64 million that relates to the presidential stimulus package that was under this program, and then the 2.329 million that was sitting under development and research under poverty alleviation. But as well, if you look at the overall budget of 270 million, it was quite a small figure there that was then not spent at the end of the day. The next slide then just quickly touches on our 15-day payments. We have broken it down into our various areas of NPO payments to suppliers, and then sundry payments. But if we refer to the bottom of the slide, the overall performance in that last quarter on 15 days was 78%. Moving to the next slide then is the 30-day payments, where our overall performance was 90.81%. During this last quarter, Chair, and I think Honourable Chair, in the previous meetings where we did engage, we indicated that we were basically doing a clean up of the system. So to a large extent, that affected this number in the last quarter to go down quite significantly, because we didn't want to carry too much of that through into the new financial year, that you are in a position to start on a clean slate when you start your new financial year. And I think in the responses to some of the follow-up questions, you would see we also provided that additional evidence to support that, where how the situation has improved with regards to 30-day payments subsequently. The next slide is then just our preferential procurement spend. The triple BEE with regards to historically disadvantaged individuals, we achieved 89% versus the target of 80%, with a total spend of 821 million. On women, the target was 40%. We also overachieved on that, not overachieved, we exceeded the target. We can still push that further to ensure that we empower women, and as well as the area of youth, where we also exceeded the target of 10% by 26%. So on women, we spent 392 million. On youth, 188 million. People with disabilities, we struggled a little bit with that performance during the last financial year. We were only spent 18 million and achieving 2.14% of that. With regards to the last slide then, is on our township economic revitalization strategy and the spend within that. The provincial annual target is 40%, and at the end of the financial year, we achieved 38%. With regards to township spend of 341 million rand that was spent in that. Honourable Chair, honourable members, MEC and colleagues, thank you very much. That brings us then to the end of this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm now going to ask members to ask for clarity-seeking questions, and then thereafter I will take hands from all the stakeholders that would want to ask any clarity-seeking questions. Member Nsakwe.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you, MEC, to you and your team for a comprehensive presentation. I do want to ask a very sensitive question. With regards to Program 5 and the continuous underspending year on year, I'm beginning to wonder whether the department should have maybe, or whether has the department had any consideration to review the programs and come up with programs that would comply with the National Treasury requirements, especially now that you've got a Concord ruling that you're struggling with in terms of meeting your mandate. That's the first part. The second question, the CFO talks about 2 million underspend under research and development. It's 2 million, that looks like a little bit of money, but to be honest, considering the under expenditure that the department is struggling with, I'm actually thinking research and development is the very crux of trying to determine whether a program is functioning or not functioning. And I would appeal to the department to say, maybe if they'd put more effort into that research and development to make an assessment on whether the cooperatives are actually working for the department in terms of developing dignity packs and school uniforms, you might have had a better outcome in terms of how to move forward instead of having 5 years of under expenditure with regards to dignity packs and school uniforms. So for me, it might seem like a little, but that 2 million could have gone a long way to give something that seems to be a hurdle for the department to overcome. And that's a comment. The first one was a question. Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Can I get any indication from Honourable Makakula? Do you want to say something?
Thank you, Chairperson. There was a page where it was reporting on the projects which have been completed. I don't see it here, but I just want to check on. I've seen the Bantu Bonke ECD that is completed and it's waiting for the municipality to approve for the handover. I just want to check whether is it completed? Is it like that? Because in one of the committee where I'm sitting, I have got a report on Wednesday yesterday that a project is still not complete. But if it's complete, I think the department, I'll get the clarity here if it's one of the completed one or it's on the verge of being completed. Thank you, Chairperson.
Yeah, before I give you the second bite, there's a member whose hand is up on the virtual platform. Member Engelbrecht.
Chair, thank you very much, and thank you to the MEC and the departments for this presentation. I have just a few questions, and the first one is regarding the overpayments.
Member Engelbrecht, you can come in.
Yes. Can you hear me, Chair?
Technical, we seem to have a problem. We can't hear the member. Okay, we'll come back to you, Honourable Member. Member Nsakwe, you can come in.
Thank you, Chair. On my second bite, I just want to ask on the infrastructure projects, on the GOD projects, somehow I'm struggling to understand where the LGBTIQ community has been accommodated. And I think it's been something we've been trying to raise as a committee. Then there was an allocation of 88 million to assist with homelessness. And somehow for me, CFO, that is missing in terms of reflecting of how that money was spent in the annual report. And then just want to get another part that was also bothering me. Oh, on your issue of compensation of employees, I think I need to understand how the money was reprioritized, because it doesn't seem to talk to how it was reprioritized. And then my last question, and I won't have a third bite, Chairperson, I promise. There's money that was unspent, which came late into the province. And I want to find out whether the money could not have been accrued to be spent in 2022-23 fiscal, so that we don't lose that money again. Thank you.
Okay. Member Engelbrecht, can you come in?
Chairperson, yes. Am I audible?
If possible, can you just write your question on the chat group? Then we can read it through, because we can't hear you. You don't seem to be connected. We can see you are unmuted, but you're not coming through. As we await your input, maybe just to check, especially on the last issue that Member Nseka has raised, on the issue of there was an additional 88 million that the department received for the homeless. If you could just indicate how you spent that money, you know, so that the committee can be clarified on that matter, CFO. And then maybe talk a little bit more on the quality assurance program. If you could just clarify some few issues there on the quality assurance program that you undertook. And then talking to the victim empowerment centers. I know we have proposed before that you work closely with the Department of Community Safety. Just maybe to
Let me
check
just call her
in terms of
the
the social work forensic on GBV. If you can just clarify to us as to what services are they providing, and how many of those are there, and where they are located, so that we get a global picture of what the social work forensics are doing. And yeah, I think I will stop there, and I will allow members to
I've got the mic
put further
on, but
questions
I don't know how
if
to
there are
increase the volume.
any. And in the meantime, I will check with a member, Brownwin, on the chat group, but I think you can respond to those few questions before I take questions from members of the public, while I read through the question from member Albrecht.
Just so many important questions to ask, but this is really not acceptable.
Oh, Member Nseka has got one last question. You can come through.
Thank you, Chair. Last year, with regards to the dignity packs and school uniforms, the explanation that was given to us was that there was a late finalization of specification. This year, it's the same response that we got to the under expenditure. May I ask why it was not possible to use the specification, or if last year we could not finalize the specification, why was the specification not developed so that this year you don't have to struggle with a late specification for packs and uniforms to avoid the under expenditure this year? Thank you.
Okay, you can come in with the responses before we take further hints.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members, for the questions. I'm just going to try and touch on a few that raised on finances. Chair, I just need to, the first one that you requested additional response on from yourself. I didn't fully catch that one.
Okay, I think it related to the 88 million additional funding for the homeless people, just to get a sense of how that money was spent. And maybe before you respond, CFO, I've just received questions from member Engelberg on the line. She talks to the overpayment to the NPOs. She says it's not the first time that happened, and she wants to check your control systems in terms of preventing that act from happening.
Sesibuza more questions now
Why
kuzabalandukana.
these NPOs were overpaid.
Yeah.
And I think it was one of the findings.
Then mic
The irregular and wasteful expenditure relates to that. She's also making a comment to say that the 1 billion irregular expenditure is a huge concern. And she wants to know what consequence management has been effected in that regard in terms of the irregular expenditure of 1 billion. And she also makes a comment on the unspent budget of the 270 million, which could have been used, to provide for vulnerable children. And she makes a point that these issues indicates a weakness in planning and in your implementation. And she also raises the fact that the non-compliance with the bidding processes, especially with a bids of under 500,000. It's a serious problem. And what is the department doing about it? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. And maybe then if I can just quickly work backwards from the last questions. I think just on the underspending, it was 122 million rand underspending. That was the final figure there. I think as we've gone through that specifically with regards to the COE funding, and I think it also ties back, Member Nseki, to your question that you raised, whether we could have used it for anything else. This was earmarked allocation funding that's had a specific purpose. I think as I presented as well, I indicated that the National Department allocated these funds specifically for the appointment of social workers. We had engagements with them because of the number of, I think it was over 1,000 that we needed to find to appoint to potentially get close. So we said to them, is there any other possibility of us maybe appointing social auxiliary workers or other relevant supporting staff so that we can push the expenditure and take out services? But the funding was specifically to social workers, so there was no room for us to maneuver in that. The second part of the under expenditure, the 64 million, was related to the presidential stimulus relief funding, which was also allocation from the National Department of Health. Apologies for that, social development. And it also came with a specific earmark with regards to the payment of the ECD sector and NPOs that applied for the funding for relief in that area. So there was also no option with regards to reprioritizing or shifting those funds. The same for then the under expenditure under dignity packs, which was also earmarked allocations. That's also coming from national. So those funds is not funds that can just be reprioritized within the departmental process. So I think wherever we were able to reprioritize towards key areas and in assisting in bridging some of the gaps in some of our other funding areas, we were able to do that. Just with regards, I think the aspects raised on irregular expenditure, Chair, if you allow for us to maybe address that under the follow-up questions, I think that will follow later on. There is detailed responses that is provided on that, as well as then the overpayments that went to cooperatives, that is manufacturing school uniform. It was not necessarily, it wasn't within NPO overpayments that was made. It was overpayments done to cooperatives in the school uniform area. I think with regards to the specifications, Member Nseki, with regards to not being able to finalize, just to give a little bit of context, we actually, the specifications for dignity packs was ready and it was approved. We advertised in February, but a few days after the date which National Treasury indicated that any tender that went after the 16th of February should be put into abeyance until they got clarity from the Constitutional Court with regards to what happened there, which then 4 months later, in essence, just pretty much told us that everything is in order and we could have just carried on. So on that, we then went through a process of re-advertising this tender. In the meantime, based on the fact that the tender was put on hold, we obtained also a deviation from Provincial Treasury to implement it throughout the open tender process and through a request for information to ensure that we are delivering dignity packs. The tender was advertised and we are currently in the evaluation phase. So we should be also, as we're heading towards the end of the financial year, be making the appointment for the next 24 months in the supply and delivery of dignity packs, which would bring some stability for us in that area. The specifications of school uniform was then also for that 4 months while we were waiting the clarification, was put on hold. When the judgment came back, we put the specifications back into the process. It's been finalized and approved and should be advertised within the next week. Then they just further on the 2 million that's sitting under research and development, Member Nseki, just to clarify there, the program is called Development and Research, but it is sitting under poverty alleviation. So it's not necessarily meant for development and research. And I think it was just the funds that we reprioritized that we weren't able to pay at year end, and as well as we did some recoveries from NPOs. We weren't at that late stage able to spend some of the funding that was allocated. On homelessness, the full allocation was spent with regards to homelessness. I missed just what sub-program?
Families.
Under families. So if we look under the slides on the NPOs, under families, that's where the 86 million that is allocated for homeless, and we have fully spent that budget. What has also transpired subsequent to that, you would recall that we got the allocations year on year, but I think based on the fact that we've been spending it, the full budget in the last two years, Treasury has now also allocated this to us on over the 3-year MTF. So we have funding for that for the next 3 years. And I think our spending is also well on track with regards to homeless, and we're also looking at expanding on some of the services in that area. I think that covers mainly all of the finance questions that was posed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to respond to the question on GOD. Just to indicate that currently on the Gauteng template to report, they have not yet included that, but departments have been advised to ensure that when we disaggregate information, we also reflect on that. So on our programs, especially for this current financial year, we are able to demonstrate that we are also covering on that aspect. And I want to believe that going forward, we will be able to report on that. It's just that initially it was not included, but that does not mean there were no services that were being rendered for the LGBTQI plus community. We were also focusing on them. There was also a question around where are the forensic social workers and psychologists are located.
They are working together with the Department of Community Safety. There is a unit within South African Police Services linked to this program. But I must highlight, Chair, that fortunately, day before yesterday, on the 25th, yes, when we celebrate Orange Day, I visited some of our shelters, and I did get the report that they do get the services, especially for the victims of human trafficking. They do get services from this specialized group. Thanks.
Yeah, maybe on the, I don't know if there's anyone else who's responding to any question. Because I wanted to bring up a follow-up question, especially with regards to the subject that which is similar to what you have just highlighted, HOD, on the victim-friendly rooms and the child-friendly rooms. Are these child-friendly and victim-friendly rooms really friendly to the victims? And how much of your focus is there, on those victim-friendly rooms? And yeah, I think if you can just maybe touch on that, because I think it's a little bit related to your response. Thanks.
Chair, I also forgot to respond to the Bantu Bonke question. At the time of reporting, it was at 90% completion. But I must then highlight, Chair, that one of the challenges that the department is faced with regard to completion of projects is with regard to us acquiring the occupancy certificates from municipalities. It becomes a tedious progress going backwards and forwards, but what we have done in order to deal with that, we have got a technical committee where we deal with municipalities during our intergovernmental relations, and then we also escalate to the MEC and MMCs. So thus far, we have been unable to unlock some of the blockages that have been there. So as soon as Bantu Bonke has reached 100% completion, I think we will then be in a position to report on how far we've gone. I think the question that I didn't get clearly, it was on quality assurance, and I'm not so sure if the team, DDG Kabasia is going to respond to that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope I've been advised by the team to speak from this one. So I don't know if it's visible. It's audible, sorry. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I would want to make comments on the DQA or the quality assurance processes. These are processes that the department implements, particularly in areas where there is a need to improve on service delivery or systems, both in state-run facilities as well as NPO-run facilities. So we continuously have an annual program that we follow that is able to assist us to deal with those challenges or the gaps in service delivery that may be identified. So the system is working very well for us. And we are currently in terms of the new structure, formulating a new unit that will be responsible for quality assurance to make sure that we can really institutionalize those interventions. And secondly, Honorable Chair, there was an issue around underspending on program 5 and also linking that to Member Engelbrecht's view around the fact that reprioritization it's a sign of weakness in planning and implementation. Now, Honorable Chair and members, the major areas where we could not spend was on school uniform and dignity packs. And that's where we then reprioritized. But in certain areas where we reprioritized, it was not necessarily because of poor planning or anything. It was because we had to deal with new priority areas as a department. For example, after the cabinet approved the anti-poverty strategy, we had to relook into our plans and reprioritize our budget to make sure that we strengthen our sustainable livelihood interventions, focusing on job placement, skills development, entrepreneurship development, and so forth. So it is only in those two areas where there were challenges, administrative challenges, but the rest, it was really reprioritization to respond to priorities of government. With regard to the victim empowerment centers, the victim empowerment services that we have, particularly in our police stations, Honorable Chair, are very effective. However, we had a situation where we were not representative, or we didn't have a footprint in all police stations in the province. So when we did the allocation for the current financial year, we reprioritized funds to make sure that we establish all these VECs in all the other police stations where we are. But we are comfortable that victims of violence and femicide, when they come to those facilities, they are able to receive the necessary care and support that they need. Yeah, I think those are the two areas. But maybe just to emphasize on the homeless issue, which the CFO has already spoken about. Our focus when we started, Honorable Chair, was to create infrastructure where we can be able to house the homeless people in the province. We have been able to create in the last financial year infrastructure in Johannesburg, in Ekurhuleni, in Tshwane, in Sidibeng, and we are left with West Rand, where we'll be prioritizing in the current financial year. But we have also intensified program implementation together with all the sister departments and other stakeholders involved to make sure that people who are accommodated in the shelters do receive the necessary care and support that they need. Thank you very much.
Okay. Are there any follow-up questions?
Thanks, Ndate Kabasia. I just want a quick follow-up. Maybe you can assist me. My understanding is that National Public Works had given Gauteng 6 buildings, which hopefully could have been used either as shelters or as for either victim empowerment or for homelessness. What happened to those 6 buildings?
Yeah. Honorable Chair, thank you very much for the question, Honorable Tsek. Indeed, you are correct that the Department of Public Works, through the National Department of Social Development, allocated buildings which were earmarked for use as shelters for victims of violence in the province. And those were actually allocated to us about a year ago. And we were ready, Honorable Member, to utilize those facilities. In fact, we had allocated 10 million rands as a department to operationalize those shelters, including having some of them being state-run. But there were technical issues between Public Works, DID, where they could not agree whether the department is going to lease the department or Public Works is releasing the buildings into the asset register of the province and so forth. And because of those technicalities that could not be resolved between National Public Works, DID, and National Social Development, we tried to intervene until such time that we had to write a letter back to National DSD and say that we are returning the buildings back to their care until they have sorted out all the legal matters that prohibited us from accessing the building. Unfortunately, that 10 million that we had reprioritized to operationalize those facilities, we had to reprioritize it to procure other services in the department. We were National DSD contacted us not long ago, probably about 2 weeks ago, where they said that they have now found a solution and that the buildings will be reallocated to social development before the end of the financial year. So we will be ready and waiting, Honorable Member, to activate our processes in that regard. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe as the last follow-up question for myself, CFO, in terms of the AG's report on the GP2 power tender that was cancelled, and the company subsequently took you to court, and you had to reach a out-of-court settlement and pay the company, which also rendered you to acquire an irregular expenditure. I just want to check with you if when you reached that out-of-court settlement, could you not foresee the risk, of having to acquire that irregular expenditure? How did you deal with the matter? How did you come to that conclusion, taking into account the risk that you knew you faced? If you can just explain that. Member Nseke wants to do a follow-up on that question.
I think if I can add on to the chair's question, the fact that the out-of-court settlement was 48 million is concerning. I would like to know whether the department found itself at fault by reneging on the agreement, which then had them ending up having to have an out-of-court settlement. Because I think if the department was on the right side of the law, there was no reason for the department to have an out-of-court settlement. Generally, out-of-court settlements have a particular indication to say we have recognized that potentially we were at fault, and to avoid further legal battles with GP2, let's rather have an out-of-court settlement. But 48 million, that could have gone to service delivery. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I will respond to this. Firstly, I would like to clarify that the department did not have a contract with GP2 Power. In the past years, when the 5 food banks were delivering food, they were having contracts with various service providers, and GP2 Power was one of them. In 2018-19 financial year, while we were grappling with the matter of the classification circular, GP2 Power delivered food, which was delivered to beneficiaries. So as a department, we did not want to unjustifiably benefit from that process. And I want to underline, there was no contract between the department and GP2 Power. However, we sought for legal advice in this regard. And we also indicated as a department that reconciliations were done to ensure that the delivery notes that were received by the food banks, then they add up to the total amount of 48 million, which is the food that was delivered between April and June 2018. So it took a longer process, and if you look at the amount that they were claiming from the department, because they were even including other things to say they had a contract. But to be honest with you, there was really no contract with the Department of Social Development. And they also indicated that they have had contracts with the 5 food banks, but all 5 food banks could not give the department that contract. However, as I indicated, it was in order for a department to demonstrate that, yes, the food was delivered and it was distributed to people. So we don't want to unjustifiably benefit from that. So that which we could reconcile in terms of us calculating from the delivery notes, it came to that amount. Yes, we are always mindful of the fact that if a process did not follow due processes in terms of requesting for approval to do that and also signing for a service level agreement, hence perhaps it is considered as irregular. But we had to do that and honor that as a department. But if you would look at the initial amount and what we have finally paid, Chair, assisted by the legal team, you would note that we have really saved a substantial amount of money by going through that out-of-court settlement. Thanks.
Yeah, I think this takes me back to a question that I asked earlier, which was not adequately responded to, or perhaps I missed it, in terms of the flouting of the competitive bidding process for tenders, RFQs below 500,000. I mean, we asked about the internal controls in that regard, and I think we did not get a response to that effect. Madam Secretary.
Chair, as much as I want to leave it here, but I want to say the HOD's response leaves me with more questions now than answers on the 48 million. I'm not going to ask them here, but we'll take it at a different venture. But I think your response for me is shockingly bringing a hell of a lot more questions into my mind when you're saying there was no contract, the legal advice, you had to look at the reconciliations. I think I'm just looking at it from a layman's term. For me, I would have said that's a donation. So why must you go to an out-of-court settlement? There's a lot of companies that donated food during COVID. I don't hear anybody going to out-of-court settlement. And especially when you tell me they also had no contract with the department, no contract with the 5 food banks. I've got a lot of questions. I'm sorry, but I'm going to leave it here. But I wanted you to know my concerns.
Chair, if I may.
MSC, yes.
Thank you. Could we just request from the Portfolio Committee that we deal with this matter? And I'm just noting that it seems as though there's an issue as it relates to this. If you would allow that I spend time with the team so that they take us through the details and the facts at hand, where the court case is and so forth, so that we're able to give greater clarity. I'm noting the contradictions that she's saying, because if we're saying we made a payment, yet there's no contract, we're contradicting ourselves. So that's why I'm requesting that we please be given time so that we can come back to the Portfolio Committee. Thanks.
Yes.
I would like to propose maybe that the department has a special presentation to the committee to unpack this GP2 contract in far more detail than. Obviously, there's a lot more items on the agenda today.
Yeah, I think
then we can interrogate it further.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what the MEC is proposing as well. Yeah, let's just get the last response on the internal controls on the competitive bidding process.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. Honourable Chair, just to quickly, I think just to put the finding into context with how it appears in the annual report, specifically, it's not across the board. It specifically relates to repairs and maintenance work that the department has been performing during the financial year. Ever since the last how many years, we've been any transaction where you have some repairs or maintenance that needs to be done at a specific institution. One would then go out on a request for quotation. If it's below 500,000, contractor would come on board, they would come and do the work, we would settle the amount. And we actually had a range of different suppliers that we used at the various institutions. Also then looking when one goes out on those RFQs, that you also consider the locality of where the services needs to be rendered. So we in essence did our repairs and maintenance work on that basis. And the past few years, the AG never had any concerns with regards to that process when they audited it. This year we did have a different audit team that came on board, which was then of the view that we should have had a panel, a tender in place for these specific services, and they were of the view that we were splitting, in essence, the various orders to suppliers. However, there was a list of close to 500 different suppliers that we've been using for various lines of services. So what we have done then is we've in essence stalled the procurement process around repairs and maintenance while we've asked for deviation from National Treasury to be able to continue with that while we are putting a panel in place. We considered participating in panels that was set up by other departments that was already there for repairs and maintenance, but that's also an aspect that is prohibited within the supply chain regulations. So we couldn't follow that suit. So we had to, in essence, we currently not doing repairs and maintenance work so that we don't incur any further irregular expenditure based on the findings from the Auditor General. I think this was a finding that we did have a bit of disagreement with the AG at year end, but I think at the end we concluded with the finding and said we will then put relative corrective measures in place with addressing and dealing with the aspect. So I don't think it was necessarily for each one of those contracts as well, because you're working in the infrastructure environment. We also, with further compliance, we looked at CIBD registration of these various suppliers, making sure that they are on the right levels and it's competent and qualifying. So it was just the interpretation of how we executed the various transactions. When we executed the transactions, we followed each relevant prescript in ensuring that it was a competitive process and the best price won, and that people are compliant and competent to execute. However, AG was of the view it should have been through a panel and tender process, and hence then why it then concluded to irregular expenditure. I hope that maybe gives a little bit of context to where the finding emanates from and what we've then subsequently done and trying to do to resolve, because it is now also creating a potential underspending situation for us, and then as well you're not able to do vital repairs and maintenance at institutions, so it has significant impacts. Thanks, Honourable Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. As I've indicated, our stakeholders, I'm going to take hands from your side. If there's any clarity seeking question or comment that you want to make, the department is here to respond to your input relevant to the annual report, the performance of the department, as well as the AG findings. If I can get hands from my extreme left, is there anyone who wants to say something? No, I don't see any hand. Oh, Mama, yes. One, and then this side. I'm just going to take hands. I'm not going to allow people to raise hands after other people have spoken. So I'm going to take all the hands so that you can pose your questions and then the department can respond. Okay, I've noted one here. Nothing. Oh, there's two hands. 1, 2. So there's 3 so far. Here, there's nothing. That side, there's 1. So we've got 4 hands. Let's start with number 1.
Sanibonani, nguNosipho Mazibuko. Ngiphuma SDB ngaphansi kwe-Westside Park Crisis Committee. Ngicela ukwazi ukuthi ndeni ngiyezwa ukukhulunywa ngendaba yokuxhaswa kwabantwana ngamaphesi nangama-uniform. Kubalulekile kakhulu lokho. Kodwa bengicela ukuthi ndeni i-social development why ngoba kunabantu abahlala bangasebenzi, abanye bahlala nabogogo. Why ingaxhasi na ngama-food parcels ngoba uma thina mina nguNosipho ngiyabona ukuthi kule ndawo kuyahlushekwa. Ngiyakhona ukuthi ngimsebenzise umntwana, ngiyazi ukuthi le mntwana udinga ukudla, uzothatha le nto engifuna ukuthi ayenze ayoyenza ngoba afuna ukuthi akhona ukuthi axhase ngaphakathi kwekhaya. So ngifuna ukwazi ukuthi social development engakhona ukuthi ixhase ngama-food parcel ngoba kunabantu abahluphekayo njengoba kuloku kusho ukuthi ama-food parcel bewaphuma. Angikhumbuli inhlobo mina ngala ngihlala ngakhona kuthiwa ama-food parcel okusuka ngo-2020 kufikela 2022 akunama-food parcel ake aphuma. Ngiyabonga.
Sanibona nonke, ngigama uMelusi Ndaba, ngiphuma e-Ivory Park. Bengifuna ukubuza kule statement about ama-NPO payments and stuff. When mabethi clean up, what do you mean when you say clean up, and how do you do a clean up? And also second question is that how do you assist in terms of helping the homeless and the people who stay in NGOs? Because most kids who stay in NPO and NGO, they usually struggle when they finish their matric. They usually struggle to go to university or college and stuff. So it becomes a problem when they finish matric. So they will be overage and stuff because of most NGO and NPO. They have age allocation which is under the age of 18. So how do you assist those who are above 18 to, if they want to proceed with their studies, or how do you help them to get learnership or work or something like that? Thank you.
Sanbonana, Lucanyo from Ivory Park, under the organization called by Youth Explosion. Ngiyanizwa la phambili niyakhuluma niyabeka ukuthi nisebenzise njani imali and then nesafisa uqhubekeka kanjani ngemali, but thank you kwalapho phambili bonakala engathi anizwisisani. Mina isicelo sami siwani kule mali engange-2 million engathi khona isesayidini. Ngicela ke nisisize njengama organization azayo la ekhaya. Kuma registers akhona la several times si-attenda. Ngicela ke nisibheke because of one reason. Sinceda umphakathi. Lo mphakathi siunceda ngokwinhliziyo zethu ngoba sifuna ukunceda, but manje kubuhlungu ukuthi usize umuntu kwa wena ungenalutho. Njengoba umama ebekile ukuthi umphakathi omninzi uyakhala ngokudla. It's not about ukudla, it's about ukuthi at least sibasize nathi babe nento abayenzayo, but masingabonelelwa yini lapho phambili sithanda ubanzima. Ngiyabonga.
My name is Jimmy Ngobeni. I'd like to know, since you guys spoke about the irregular spending, I'd like to know what are the strategies that you've implemented so far in order to prevent the overspending on NPOs. And again, I would also like you to show us the stats in terms of, I saw that you have allocated 80 million for the homeless. So can you also show us the stats that shows the improvements that you have done so far in terms of improving the lives of homeless people? Thank you.
Okay, I've noted an additional hand here, which is the last one. The lady in black, yeah, just in front here. Lapha phambili.
Good afternoon. My name is Colleen. I am from Tembisa, Ward 7 to be precise. I just wanted to ask, like, I think this is the most important thing since a lot of people don't even know about some of these things, like, for example, the 6 buildings that are allocated for GBV and dignity packs and stuff like that. And also, I'd like to know which are these food banks that they're talking about that they've been actually supplying, because I know that there's no food bank within Tembisa. So I would like to know about that. And again, what kind of centers or programs are implemented for GBV specifically? Do they have to go to the police stations and report, and what happens after that? And again, I didn't hear much about substance abuse that's actually affecting the youth, because I heard there was a program that's coming up. They're going to actually collect most of the youth that's affected by Nyaupa within our communities. And from what I've heard from them is that they've been waiting for a very long time. And with controlling of checking these rehabilitation centers which are within our communities, are they actually legal to be running and stuff like that? That's what I wanted to understand. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all the questions. Okay, that's why I took hands in the first place. Okay, but I'll allow you to ask your question. That's the last one. Okay.
Sanbonan, dumelang Abshin. Tlo bua ka English or ka Sotho, a tsebe tla utlwisa. My biggest concern are the youth centers. We always say the youth are the leaders of tomorrow, but we feel as though there's a huge gap between the youth and the leaders of tomorrow. Considering both substance abuse, I'm looking at the number of centers within the Gauteng area, number being 157. What do we have in place? What do you guys have in place to have that number increasing, considering the high increasing social ills, especially among the youth? That's what I'd like to ask.
Okay, give her an opportunity. Yeah, she can ask. Okay.
Dumelang, ke Lonia from Ivory Park, Ward 79. Ne re sebetsa le organization e ba e bitsang Greater Midrand Development Center in terms of identifying beneficiaries tsa di-food parcels. But it's been 3 years, food bank, re fad list, and then we don't know, re communicate le man direct. And hona le unemployment rate high ko Ivory Park. So if you can be assisted to re bua le mang in terms of food bank. And then number 2, concern e ke na leng yona kore why social development fa di bursaries tsa di social workers and aba khona ho ba hira, so ke bona is a balance or why ko fa bursary and then ho be le number e ngata di social worker a ke bone e fall under scarce skills anymore, because then aba hiriwe. So nna ne ke tlo suggest why ba sa kene ko dikolong le di psychologists ne, because hona le problem e ngata mo dikolong. And then why basa iblela nkare tutu mo dikolong, because really there's truly a need mo dikolong, and then le di center tse dingwe tse youth related. And then number 3 ke bo effective ba di social workers tsa social development on the ground, because ra ba fa di case and then a ke ba bone ba etsa door to door. So for the case tsa rena di ja track na ko Ivory Park, and then le age limit ya di bursaries le di internship go 17 to 30 years. And then what about the 35? Although it's about the definition ya youth or 18 to 35, but Rezanka 36 years, what is social development doing about 37 years in terms of the programs? Thanks.
Okay, department, you can respond. Thank you very much for all the inputs and the questions. The department will respond.
Thank you very much for the questions. Maybe let me start first with the question that was asked around what do we do about people who are accommodated in the homeless shelters. We do have got, or in institutions of social development. I think firstly with the homeless, we do have a lot of programs that we implement from the 80 million that was referred to by my colleague there. Firstly, we create a safe space and a safe environment by creating shelters for the homeless. And secondly, we do a number of programs, including family reunification, where we reunify people who are homeless with their families. We have intervened with Home Affairs to make sure that those who don't have identity documents can receive them, and then they are able to access different benefits of the state, like your grants, whether you're talking about the 350 or any other grant which people may qualify for. We also fund healthcare services in the shelters where people get healthcare. Those who are substance abuse abusers as well, we are linking them with our treatment centers. They get treated and rehabilitated, and so forth. So we do have a package of service that we provide for anyone who qualifies as a beneficiaries of our homeless program. But with regard to our institutions, we've got a program that is called independent living. Okay, maybe first we have the one that is called deinstitutionalization, because we don't want young children to stay far too long in our institutions. So we want to deinstitutionalize them far more quicker and reintegrate them back into either families or communities. And secondly, we've got the independent living program that is targeting those that are about to leave the institutions. So we teach them a number of skills, and we have also allocated a specific budget on independent living so that we can be able to reach these young children. And then those who go to school, they also have got access to other services like bursaries. We are also allocating them to different learnerships that the department has. We give them opportunities there. In fact, I must indicate as well, Honorable Chair, we've got a number of those that have actually been given an opportunity to be employed by the department as child and youth care workers. So we do have a number of interventions that we are implementing, but certainly we need to intensify so that we can reach more of these children. Overspending on NPOs, we don't have a problem of overspending in as far as the NPO budget is concerned. And in fact, we have spent, I think, over 95% of our budget, almost, throughout the years, in as far as NPI allocation is concerned. So we don't have a big challenge there.
I think he wanted to say the overspending on the cooperatives.
Or the overpayment.
Overpayment, yes.
Okay, all right. No, my apologies for that, Honorable Chair. We have got 5 food banks. We've got 5 food banks we call them food distribution centers in all the 5 regions of Gauteng. The one that would serve areas like Ivory Park will be the one that is located in the Johannesburg region. So we will maybe, Honorable Chair, take contact numbers after the session so that we can, link our colleague with the relevant people who can be able to assist. But certainly because of the delays in the procurement of food, there will be, a process that will be explained to them in terms of the timelines in which we can be to respond with regard. For gender-based violence, Honorable Chair, we intervene in 3 critical areas. One is the creation of shelters for women and children in particular. But we also have a shelter for men as well, men who may be abused by their partners. We also implement the victim support centers in police stations that is also accessible to members of the public. We also implement prevention programs throughout the province. So those are the main 3 areas of intervention in as far as gender-based violence and femicide programs are concerned. I want to believe I would have covered the areas, but my colleagues, if I have skipped anything, they may want to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, honourable members, MEC, and participants. Thank you for the questions. I would just like to respond in terms of internships as well as bursaries that Gauteng Social Development is offering. It is an annual process. We will advertise both for internships as well as bursaries. It is obviously linked to the funding that we do have available. So there is a target in terms of the number of the learnerships and the bursaries that we offer. The internship is a 24-month program, and it's targeted at people that has completed some form of qualification, and then they will do their in-service training with the department, depending on the categories that we've requested for. The bursaries, for 2023, we have advertised bursaries for community development, financial management, demography and population development, clinical psychology, as well as occupational therapy. It is linked to our need in the department at the moment for placement in those categories. What we do cover is registration, tuition, books and study material. And then the department does not guarantee a job opportunity afterwards, but we do fund your bursary. There's many Gauteng government departments that at this time of the year advertise bursaries and learnerships. And then just to comment on the issue around bursaries for social workers, we have for those social workers that had bursaries with Gauteng Social Development, we have placed all those social workers, or as they finish their qualifications, we will place them in the department. It is part of a walk-in strategy from the National Department of Social Development. But I must underline it, we can only do that for people whose bursaries we've funded. The issue is that there are a lot of social workers that are migrating from other provinces that may have had bursaries in other provinces, which then obviously also leads to a lot of unemployed social workers in our province. I trust that covers the questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Honorable Chair, Honorable Members, MEC, HOD, and everyone. I just want to add with regards to the question on the homelessness, the programs that we provide in the shelters also, we link them with skills development centers so that they can become employable and leave the shelters and go and work and, either rent rooms or, go back home. The other thing that we do is to link them with job placement opportunities, because people who are in shelters, most of them are educated, and they just want to be linked with, someone who can, appoint them. There was a question that you asked about substance abuse, that what are these centers legal, or what are the services that are available in these centers? Yes, as the department, we do partner with centers, treatment centers, inpatient treatment centers, halfway houses, community-based services, and outpatient services when it comes to provision of substance abuse interventions. So all these centers are registered in terms of the Substance Abuse Act 70 of 2008. So any program
anyone who says, I want to render a substance abuse program has to be registered in terms of the Substance Abuse Act and has to comply. So there are specifics in terms of what is it that you need to do for you, to comply. So the services, they are all in all the regions. We've got centers that we are funding. We've got community-based services that we are funding to ensure that services are accessible to our communities. And furthermore, our own department, social workers, are also providing substance abuse services. So if you go to a DSD office, for example, they will also assess you. They will also check, and before they can refer you to a treatment center for, for further interventions. So there was another question about our social workers said they are not effective or they are not accessible in communities. Yes. Yeah, you're saying that our social workers are not doing door to door. Yes, yeah. Yes, we do service delivery blitz every now and then in communities. We do door to doors, which are often linked to programs. But in terms of us going door to door and investigating, if cases are referred for children, for example, in terms of the Children's Act, for if a child, there are allegations of child abuse and all that, we are mandated by the Act, by the Children's Act, to go and investigate, and check. And there are specified hours where we're supposed to go there and check and verify if indeed this child is neglected or the child is abused. And the social worker, based on the assessment that he has done, he will either remove the child to place the child in alternative care, or he will intervene there and see how best he can deal with the situation. But that the assessment by the social worker on the ground informs what he will do next. So they do door to door, but we call them visits, yes. But we do door to door or linked to programs and also linked to the reported cases. Thank you.
Did you want to say something?
Chair, there was a question.
Okay, you can come in, HOD.
Sorry about that. There was a question, and I think it's quite critical because the lady asked around the issue of age limit on bursaries and learnership. So it means there's a gap. So as a department, we acknowledge that there is that gap. Hence, among other things that we are doing is our welfare to work program. Our welfare to work program has no age limit. We consider everyone that could have been left behind, but has been through, our programs. It could be someone who may have had a problem with substance, abuse. So they may be above age, but we try and find how far have they gone school-wise. What is it that we can do? So there's a full assessment while they are undergoing rehabilitation, and then post-rehabilitation, there are various programs. I'm just giving you that as, an example, but we look at almost each and every person. It could be someone who dropped out of school because of undue circumstances at home, and they are now above 35. We also look into that to ensure that we assist them to find themselves and not just rely on social grants. So there are various programs that we are looking at in order to help young people, especially young women, to take them out of the vicious cycle of poverty. But we are also saying, as a department, we don't leave boys and young men behind, because I know the subsequent question will be, how about the young men? So we also focus on them, and there are various skills development programs that we are discovering them on a daily basis. As you know, that the world is changing. There are various technologies that are also coming into place. Earlier on, MEC, when she spoke about the fact that now we are with the Department of Agriculture. We are also learning the full value chain of the type of skills that are there. And we are saying to young people, make agriculture cool. It's not for only older people, but apparently there are studies that have shown that the next billionaires in this world will be coming from agriculture. So we are encouraging young people to also tap into that. So the Department of Agriculture will be the one that will tell you fully about the various programs. But our department, in our youth development centers, they will be in a position to tell you about the availability of information. Because I think what is key is for people to get information. So we are saying in our offices, we can be able to refer you accordingly, so that you can get the full information. There was also I'm also looking at the body language as we respond, and I see the young lady sitting in front. She asked where, with regard to victim empowerment shelters. Unfortunately, because of the sensitivity and the fact that the perpetrators follow them, we will never tell you where they are. But we will be in a position to refer you, and if you know someone who is currently being abused, they will be assisted accordingly. So we cannot tell you in Tembisa it's in this section, but the shelters are there that we are funding as a department, because we are concealing because of the fact that many a times perpetrators then follow them when they are placed there. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope that MEC, you can come in.
Thanks, Chair. I think the colleagues have responded to a great majority of the questions, but I wanted to speak to the one on substance abuse, because the question was that we are massifying, and what does that mean? So the Premier has, as colleagues will know, that we launched our call center. And this is out of appreciating Uguti. We've got a lot of young people abathathi nyaupe, and it's a big issue within our communities. So what we had done is that 2 or 3 days ago, with the Premier Sufi, we launched our call center so that those who are either parents or even the users themselves can be able to call and get assistance so that they are told where to go as part of their rehabilitation program. And once we're able to log, and that call center is currently functional, and once those calls are logged in, the social workers go and do an analysis of the individuals that have called or the individuals that are of concern, that whether it's parents or family members that would have called. And based on that analysis, we're then able to indicate whether they're going to be in or out of bound patients that the department is going to be taking care of in terms of their rehabilitation process, etc. So we are massifying, and we're fully appreciating what it's a big problem, especially to Stella in our informal settlements. And it's born out of young people not having employment opportunities or coming from troubled homes and so forth and so forth. So those are there. And again, Nakona, we have increased the bed space in terms of the number of people listening to Batata. The only thing is the HOD had indicated we can't give the exact locations, but we can tell you we do have facilities throughout the province where these individuals will be located so that they go through that rehabilitation process. And what's also good with the program is that to strengthen a program here so that banga relapse, because often they want to clean themselves up and then they go back. So skills development is a key part of the program, because we want to allow the young people to learn how to use what we call youthful exuberance in a positive manner. So instead of them redirecting that youthfulness energy towards wrong things, we want them to redirect it towards things that can assist them. And so HOD would have spoken to the welfare to work and the programs that we have there. We look at plumbing, we look at some other areas that pertain to construction. We've now introduced agriculture as part of a big one that we're going to massify, because the two departments have come together. But also we want to introduce them to the green economy. So the green economy is around environmental sustainability. As we all know, we have a huge problem in electricity right now. We want young people to get into the space of making solar panels because as a country, we have a lot of sunlight that we're not utilizing. So it doesn't make sense. We're not Europe and so forth. There's no reason for us to be having electricity problems. So we want young people to start engaging in the green economy and start introducing them into that space. And part of the reason why we're going this route, Umam Nosipo was the first person to be Kulum, talks about our food parcel, ukuthi there's a huge need. Abantu bethu balambile. But in this ngafuni ukuyenza as a department, which we have been doing, and we really want to move away from that, is that we can't have abantu who are constantly dependent on our food parcel. So we want to increase on the number of people that we get into agriculture. There's also what HOD was speaking about, studies, and it's in fact Forbes that has done the study. The next set of billionaires will be coming out of Africa and they will be in agriculture. So it does not make sense why singachanela abantu towards agriculture. Ngoba mama asifuna ukuthi sihlale siphana nabantu nama-food parcel. Sifuna abantu abazolima abakwazi ukuzenzela ukudla so that they're able to sustain themselves. This is what a developmental state is about. It's about hand-ups and not handouts. So that's where the direction that we want to go. And this is why Lama Department Wetu have now been combined so that we can assist abantu, and especially Abu Mama, Abantuana, and youth. That's really the bracket we're focusing on because issues around GBV, women stay in abusive relationships because they can't take care of themselves. Abanye badependa kubaba bayazi ukuthi I can't go anywhere. If we amshare lo muntu noma ekushaya kangakanani, uyazi ukuthi you'll end up on the street. So you'd rather remain in a toxic relationship ngoba uyasaba. So we want to empower and make sure ukuthi abantu are able to stand on their own because that's how you empower them to even get out of toxic relationships that they're in. So it's a full strategy that isn't there, but we have an appreciation of what Lama Department need to work together because for the longest time they've been doing things ngapha engiyenza izinto ngapha. So we want them to start speaking together so that sikwazi ukuncedisa abantu. So the work we will be doing, Premier Wetu has said we must focus on what we call TISH communities, townships, informal settlements, hostels. So we're focusing on these and we're going to go quite big on agriculture. And of course, substance abuse is another aspect that we're dealing with and so forth and so forth. So umsebenzi wethu mningi, and we really look to yourselves as a community to what masebenzisane so that we're able to make sure what we can deal with these key areas as khona. Ngiyabonga.
Thank you very much, MEC, for the summary. And maybe just for your information, the hotline for the anti-substance abuse, for those that don't have it, is 0800 22 88 27. 0800 22 88 27. Yeah, I think MEC has actually touched on what we are going to get a presentation on our next presentation, because we actually have requested the department to present to us the interdepartmental realignment strategy, which talks to social development linked to agriculture, as well as the new NPO funding model. I'm sure some of you who are running NPOs, you would have heard about this, but we need the department just to give a brief presentation to the portfolio committee and yourselves so that we are updated on those matters. And maybe just to also say that I have been realigned or redeployed to be the chair of agriculture, rural development and environment. So I will no longer be chairing the portfolio committee for social development. You will be having a new chairperson in the near future. So it's just an announcement to you as our stakeholders in confidence, so that next time you see somebody different, you are not surprised. But I will still be working very closely with social development because the two are under one MEC. So we will still be meeting with yourselves. So without any further waste of time, let's invite the department to give us the presentation on the interdepartmental realignment strategy, as well as the new NPO funding model. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. DDG Kabasia will be making that presentation. With your permission, Chair, we request that after he's presented the first one, he continues with the second presentation because they are linked. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, once more. Chair, I'm going to try and be as fast as I can without omitting important details for the meeting. The presentation outline is as articulated there. We'll try and touch on the legislative and policy framework, the institutional realignment project in a nutshell, the budget distribution between government and NPOs, proposals towards strengthening state capacity, institutional arrangements, work streams, project implementation plan, the value for IRP to DSD, as well as implications for the NPO sector. I'll go to the introduction. Chair, we do have various legislative mandates that informs the work that we do as social development. But also we're noting that currently social development employs the bulk of social service professionals in a form of social workers, child and youth care workers, auxiliary social workers, community development practitioners, and so forth, to deliver on a number of social development programs that deals with, psychological stress and pressures, chronic poverty, food insecurity, as well as adverse social functioning. But over time, we lacked capacity to implement on all these programs because of the shortage of social service professionals in particular. So to mitigate this, over the last few years, the department undertook a project called Recruitment and Retention Strategy, where we were able to appoint a number of social workers and social service professionals. But at the same time, we did not review the increasing pace of NPOs that are funded by the department. So over time, because we have to sustain the internal capacity, at the same time, fund the growing number of NPOs, we had to engage in this program to create some form of balance in as far as how funding is actually implemented. I'm not going to reflect on the legislative mandates and policy frameworks that the department is enjoined to implement. The presentation has been shared. Now, what is the IRP? And this is important, Honorable Chair, because we have seen a lot of misinterpretation in the media space and elsewhere. But the project is undertaken by the department to build state capacity and to reduce over-reliance on NPOs. I think this should be understood well. It's not to say that we will not work with NPOs, but the over-reliance is a challenge that we need to correct. The project is informed by the approved service delivery model and the organizational realignment process that the department is currently undertaking with all relevant stakeholders, including DPSA, and that DSD must be the leader of the social development sector, which is an area that straddles other government spheres and those of civil society. And in that instance, we need to be able to provide the requisite technical specialist skills envisaged in the National Development Plan 2030. So the department has a commensurate responsibility to have sufficient human resources to enable delivery on this mandate. And that includes capable workforce, which must be achieved through proper planning and development, so that we are able to maximize the pool of talent which the department has. And why the IRP project? The department is and should be in the forefront of dealing with the challenges through the implementation of a variety of programs which are designed to care, support, protect, and empower the most vulnerable of our communities. And due to the shrinking budget, government departments are expected to do more with less due to the declining revenue. But at the same time, this is happening when donor funding for NPOs is also shrinking. The current partnership model with NPO is unsustainable as more resources are allocated to NPOs at the expense of a developed state capacity. Service delivery by NPO still remains largely urbanized in many areas, and delivery of services often does not reach those who need the most. Factors that contribute to failures in service delivery include poor governance and leadership, institutional inadequacies that we need to correct through this IRP project. Gauteng DSD has over time, Honorable Chair, appointed social service professions into the system, and therefore the internal capacity that we continue to create must translate directly into increased state capacity to deliver on its mandate. So Gauteng DSD implemented retrieval of services previously, and we wanted to highlight this because it's not the first time that certain services were retrieved and be implemented by the state. For example, and these are just examples, in 2012, 2013, we retrieved probation services from NPOs, and these include assessment of children in conflict with the law, pre-sentence reports, pre-trial reports, victim impact statements, etc. And this retrieval of this service, Honorable Member, did not lead to the collapse of the service. In December 2021, the department successfully retrieved secure care services from children in conflict with the law from the Mogale Secure Care, formerly known as Bosasa. And these children which were accommodated in this facility have been reintegrated into our secure care centers that is located in Walter Sisulu as well as in Soshanguve. However, we also took the initiative to ensure that the staff that were qualifying from this facility were absorbed into the department to continue to render the service in these facilities. Gauteng DSD has been retrieving services from non-performing, non-compliant child protection organizations and other services, including, amongst others, Kagiso Child Welfare, NG Welsein, Wawa Tukoms Res, REIT, CMR North, etc. And these were in instances where the department could not derive value for money in as far as the funding that we are giving to these facilities. As of June 2021, Gauteng DSD trained and registered 159 social workers to do adoption services to our people free of charge. You'd recall that previously, state social workers were not allowed by law to do adoption services. Now, social work and those who were allowed to do adoption services, which is your CPO, child protection organizations, and your private social workers, were doing that at a fee, sometimes unaffordable to our own people. And we also say that, as we are saying, sometimes the services are racially skewed. If you analyze adoption services across the board, we have got both white and black children that need adoption. But black children get adopted by white families, but black families cannot adopt a white child. And those are some of the things that shows you the racial skewedness of how the services have been implemented over the time. But most importantly, you can be able to adopt a child without having to pay a cent. So these are some of the benefits of the IRP project that we are implementing. But at the same time, we have also introduced new NPOs to the field of community development, from welfare to community development, including on the program we discussed earlier on homelessness and so forth. Now, this is how the budget is distributed between government and the NPO. So we're saying there that the size and the scope of the NPO sector has grown significantly since 1990s. According to in fact, if I recall correctly, Gauteng DSD budget for NPOs just after 1994 was just below 200 million, around 200 million. And that budget has increased from 200 million to over 2 billion rands in the last few years. So according to the recent data, National DSD, there are 258,000 registered NPOs. 148 of these are non-compliant in terms of the database. Gauteng has 81,000 registered NPOs, and 47 of the 81 are non-compliant in terms of the NPO Act. Of the registered NPOs, 27,000 are registered to provide social welfare services in Gauteng, and the Department of Social Development funded approximately 3,400 during the financial year 2021-2022. But this table there, it shows you that in 2016-2017, NPOs were actually taking more of the departmental budget compared to what was allocated to the operations of the department. NPOs accounted to 53% of the total budget of the department. In 2017-18, it was 53. 18-19, it went down to 42. It grew to 43 in the subsequent year. In 2021, it is at 41%. In 2021-22, 44%. And currently, it stands at 40%. However, this is the most important slide that I would like to bring to the attention of the meeting. You see, the first part, which is A, it says transfers to NPIs for social welfare services by provinces. And I think this is important because from time to time, we have this narrative that says there are anti-NPO sentiments in Gauteng. But this slide will give you a typical and practical picture of how NPOs are being funded across different 9 provinces of Gauteng. You see there, Gauteng under A. This is the average annual growth that we recorded as a department since 2012-2013 financial year. It is only Gauteng that recorded an average annual growth in NPO funding at 17.7%. I want to refer you to at least the 2 biggest provinces outside Gauteng, which is KZN and Cape and Western Cape. You see there, Western Cape only increased NPO funding average annual of 7%. If you look at KZN, it increased. In fact, KZN, there was a minus 2.2%. And Gauteng recorded an increase of 17.7% year on year there. So you can see that Gauteng province has really moved very fast in increasing funding for NPOs compared to other provinces across the country. Number B speaks about transfer payments as a percentage of total expenditure on social welfare services. Once more, I will want to refer you to 3 provinces just to give a narrative of what I'm talking about. You see, Gauteng accounted for 48.6% of the budget allocated to the NPOs compared to what we have internally to render social welfare services. It was followed by Western Cape with 47.4% and KwaZulu-Natal with 27.6%. So Gauteng has always funded more in terms of the NPO if you look into the operations of the department versus what the NPOs are being funded. So the second slide there talks about the fact that already in 2016-17, Gauteng allocated 48.6% of its expenditure on social welfare services to NPOs, while Western Cape transferred 47.4%. And at the other end, KZN transferred 27.6% of its spending on social welfare services to NPOs, while Northern Cape only transferred 16.2%, Northwest 17.6%, Eastern Cape 17.8% of its expenditure on NPOs. And despite the Nawongo judgment, the Free State reduced its funding for NPOs from 162 2 million in 2013-14, and it went down to 154 as well as 155 million in the subsequent years. So this is just to demonstrate that Gauteng social development has always been in the forefront in allocating resources for non-profit organizations. Proposals towards strengthening state capacity. This is about reorganizing state civil society model for delivering welfare services to ensure greater accountability and improve service delivery. And I'm not going to go into the details of that, but to say that currently the model we have relies mainly on NPO, including on provision of professional social services. And what we are saying is that the extent of the kind of social ills we deal with, sometimes they will not require just your caregivers, but they will require your professional social workers to intervene so that you go to the deep of the problems that we were experiencing. But we have also recorded the decline of donor funding, as I've already indicated, but also the complexities of South Africa's poverty, social fragmentation, and lack of social support systems requires that we should change the model, because increasingly the burden of care has fallen on the poorest communities and on women and the elderly, often leading to a sense of powerlessness and social isolation. So we therefore need to respond to some of these challenges through the IRP. Next, yeah, next one. In the immediate and the medium term, we have accepted that we need to improve supply of 4 categories of social service professionals to respond to the demand of appropriate basic social welfare services, and also to respond to social breakdown of families, communities, and society that requires a range of generic and specialist education and training that is not available in poor communities in particular. So we will certainly be using this to also make sure that we strengthen the supply of social service professionals. I'm going to skip the slide on proposals towards strengthening capacity. I'll also skip the institutional arrangements. Then I'll also skip the work streams. So the key elements of the IRP, honorable members, is about analysis of internal capacity, strengthening supervision, mapping of our services, skills audit, assessment of workloads, training and capacity building, analysis and of available resources, review of funding processes and priorities, review of APP targets and our priorities, monitoring and evaluation, addressing infrastructure and related challenges, stakeholder management and communications, as well as management of the project risk. The value of this project to the department is that it will lead to reduced over-reliance on NPOs on the implementation of constitutionally legislated mandates. It will further lead to improved and better integrated planning within the department. It will lead to reproduction of skills and foster a sense of professional common purpose for social service professionals, capacitate, empower, to provide for a capacitated and empowered and accessible public service that is responsive to the people's needs. It will lead to enhanced systems, structures, mechanisms of coordination, etc. It will also lead to effective monitoring, evaluation, and verification process of our work, monitoring, quality assurance, quality improvement, and quality controls, capability matching and production of specialist technical skills, maximized utilization of existing resources, as well as communities that will be aware of the services of the department. What are the implications of the IRP to NPOs or to the NPO sector? The IRP will lead to retrieval of certain functions from identified non-performing dysfunctional NPOs. That will include, amongst others, non-center-based services, but also including NPOs that have been suspended from the service because of issues of non-compliance. We'll also take over identified services, including certain statutory services. For example, we will not be funding NPOs in the next financial year for new foster care cases, but NPOs will continue with the existing case load of foster care. We will also not be funding NPOs to render adoption services because it will not make sense that we have appointed, trained, and registered social workers to do adoption services free of charge. The question will be, why do we fund NPOs to continue to do the same work that we will be doing when they charge people and we are rendering it free of charge? The retrieval of services will not be considered for residential facilities due to limited capacity of the department. This includes CYCCs, shelters for the homeless, shelters for victims of gender-based violence, residential facilities for older persons, residential facilities for persons with disability, inpatient treatment, and halfway houses. In fact, I must say, Honorable Chair, that we will also be strengthening our support and intervention, particularly on residential facilities for older persons in the townships. So the advertisement for 2023-24 financial year will be informed by departmental needs and priorities, as I've already highlighted, and the APP and operational plan targets for government and NPOs will also be reviewed. There will also be improved program and finance monitoring and reduction in the number of funded NPOs. Honorable Chair, I need to just reflect onto this meeting that in the last financial year, because of the limitation of the budget, we're only able to give NPOs 3% increase, which has really been a problem because they are not able to fulfill their obligations because of that. So the question should be, do you keep the number of NPOs increasing and reducing their funding, or do you keep what you believe is priority and fund it well? And that is really the approach that we are funding. For example, as we are saying, we want to make sure that residential facilities are well funded, they can operate and take care of vulnerable people that are accommodated in those facilities. I will move straight to the NPO funding model because there is also a linkage in that regard. If you can go to the next presentation, please. I think it's called NPO funding model. So the purpose of the presentation, while it's loading, will include the following: NPO funding process, overall budget allocation and expenditure for 2022-23 financial year, departmental budget distribution, overall NPO financial monitoring outcome 2021-2022, monitoring plan for the current financial year, funding preparations for the next financial year, conditions for funding, as well as implications on indicators. Now, this slide that is coming, it's about the funding process, Honorable Chair, that we follow. The first one is that we request for proposal between the period of September and October. So we issue an advert for the NPO to submit funding applications. So the advert was issued on local newspapers. It has also been placed in strategic positions in community halls and so forth. And NPOs are busy with submissions which are closing today. It's actually the 31st of October, but the 31st is Monday. It's Monday. The submissions are closing on Monday. The second step will be the paneling and dealing with recommendations. And this is happening at the regional and provincial assessment panels, where all the applications will be assessed. The third step is the budget approval and allocation, which happens in the period of January to February 2023, where the NPI budget committee and the head of the department make the final approval and allocation based on the approved business plans. And the fourth part is the contracting and first payment, which happens in the period of March and April, where we sign the service level agreement and SLAs, and releasing the first tranche in April. And the last one It's really about in-year monitoring and management that happens on a quarterly basis. Now, when we did the budget allocation for the current financial year, we had to look into the resolutions of the Cabinet Lekgotla that was held in November 2022, which prioritized the focus and upscaling on war on poverty programs. The department also implemented a 3% inflationary increments across programs, and we accept and we agree. The next, please, 2021. Yeah, 2021. My apologies for that. Thanks, HOD. So the department implemented the 3% inflationary increase, which we agree that it was not adequate. But because we have got an uncontrollable number of NPOs that we are funding, you end up having to share the cake like 3%, 3%. Ultimately, if we don't reverse the situation, we'll not be able to fund any increment for NPOs, and ultimately, many NPOs will collapse. So the approach we must follow is that we must reconsider the number of NPOs that we fund, look into the priority areas where we must partner with NPOs, resource residential care facilities properly, and in that case, everybody should be happy. But most importantly, our vulnerable groups will be happy. We also said that beneficiary expansion for existing organizations were limited only to the APP and deliverology priorities. And funding of priority programs such as gender-based violence were considered. We also did not consider allocation of vehicles or equipment in the current financial year. But even if we are saying that, Honorable Chair, I must indicate that Gauteng DSD, as you may be aware, earlier this year procured and distributed over 200 brand new vehicles to the NPO sector. And it was vehicles of all sorts, private vehicles, combis, disability adjusted transport, and many others. And I'm sure honorable members and members of the public are able to see those driving around our communities. And this was done through a once-off allocation that was done from the previous financial year. Now, this is the NPI budget and expenditure, the next slide, as at the 4th of October 2022, Honorable Chair. The current budget that we have for NPOs is 2.2 billion, or 2,240,870,000. And we have reported an expenditure of over 1 billion, or 1,064 million. We have got an available budget of 1,176 million, which means that as at the 4th of October, we had almost spent 50% of our allocated budget. We are certain, honorable members, that we will be able to spend the whole allocation for the NPI budget for the current financial year. And the budget allocation was distributed as follows. Social welfare services accounted for 39.4%, children and families 25%, restorative services 22%, and development and research 12%. The next slide talks about departmental budget distribution. I've already explained this slide in the other presentation. That shows how the budget between the department and NPO is distributed. We also implement our NPO financial monitoring. Next slide, yes. NPO monitoring for 2021-22. This is the outcome and the picture that we came across. We have developed a framework or a system that is able to determine whether an NPO is a low risk, is a medium risk, or it's a high risk. But if you look under the high risk across different programs, only 8% of our NPOs were found to be high risk, 28% were found to be medium risk, 65% were found to be low risk. And for us, the more NPOs are found to be low risk, the better for us, because it means our systems are working and NPOs are doing what is supposed to be done. Now, when you look into the top table on the right, It is a breakdown according to different regions, as well as provincial office. And you see the spread there in terms of the low risk, the high risk, as well as the medium risk NPOs. Now I want to go back to the monitoring pillar or indicator below that table, where you see that we found that on governance, 9% of our NPOs were high risk. On beneficiary outcomes, meaning that they are not reaching the target, or they are not able to provide evidence that they are reaching the beneficiaries. It will be 11%. On personnel expenditure, high risk 14%. We have got NPOs that will continuously take money of programs and pay salaries for themselves. Program and admin expenditure 12%, and supporting documents where they are not able to provide evidence that they have used the money properly, 16%. And then we have got a problem of cash withdrawals, because the SLA says that you may not withdraw more than 10,000 rand at a particular time. But many MPOs still continue to draw cash beyond or above what the SLA has actually recommended. And then some NPOs will then spend money without deviation approval by the department. But still, we still have 80% of the NPOs reporting as low risk on an aggregation of this. So the monitoring tool pillar with most high risk outcomes is supporting documents with 16%, followed by cash withdrawals at 14%. But medium risk in the main governance, beneficiary outcomes, personnel, and admin at 20%. And the program with most high risk NPOs is people with disabilities. So we have a problem there on NPOs that are dealing with people with disability. One of them is Raitrela in Garangua, MEC. I'm sure you will hear from them very soon. When we tell them that they are misusing funds, they come and sleep in our offices for weeks and complain to everybody in this world that the department is not treating them well. So I will leave that slide there, MEC. On the overall, next slide, overall monitoring plan for 2022-23 financial year. Next. It doesn't move. Yeah, there is this, it has moved. We're focusing on detection, MEC, so that we are able to detect problems before they occur. Corrective action, where we write letters to the NPO to correct whatever that would have been the finding of the monitoring process. And then we also implement corrective action, where we afford NPOs an opportunity to correct their misbehavior. And we only do punitive action, honorable member, when the NPO refuses to comply with the directives of the department. And in instance where there is, for example, obvious case of fraud, we then issue, we proceed with reporting the case to SAPS, and we follow criminal action there. The next slide is on the NPO preparation for 2023-2024 financial year. As I've said, we have called for proposals, and the closing date is Monday, the 31st. And then we'll do the analysis of business plans and panels between the period October to January. And then NPO budget approvals will then happen in early to mid-Feb. Signing of SLAs will happen mid-Feb to mid-March. And then capturing of SLAs and release of the first payments will happen in April 2023. I'm concluding, Honorable Chair. Funding conditions for the next year. The department will not be funding for NPOs will not be historical and general, but rather informed by current policies of the department. In any case, I'm sure NPOs know, honorable members, that the funding has not been committed for multiple years. That's why NPOs on an annual basis, they submit the business plans which get approved, and they sign the SLA that is only limited to 1 year. So the funding will not be historical, but focus on priorities of the department and so forth. New NPOs for 2023-24 will not be considered on condition that programs will only be considered on condition that the programs are aligned to departments' identified needs or geographic area of need, for example, gender-based violence and femicide, war on poverty initiatives, etc. No adoption and new foster care services will be funded for NPOs in the current financial year. Equally so, will not fund new posts, social workers, social auxiliary workers, etc., for the NPO sector, except on identified priorities that may require such skills. Non-compliant NPOs will not be considered for funding. And non-compliance means you don't comply with the provisions of the NPO Act, you don't comply with the program legislation, policies and protocols, that you don't comply with municipal regulations in terms of environmental health certificates and so forth. So such NPOs will not be considered for funding, including those with negative audit outcomes, where there's gross violation of the SLA, funds have been deviated or mismanaged and so forth. Such NPOs will not be funded. And then I've highlighted where areas of non-funding will be. Now, implication on the indicators and the targets, because funding is also based on the targets that we are giving to the NPOs versus that which we are giving to government. So we are saying that government will be assuming the bulk of the targets on identified service priority areas. Indicators that were previously allocated to government and NPOs will now be allocated to government on identified service priority areas, not in all areas, on identified service priority areas. On indicators that are shared between government and NPOs, more target will be allocated to government on identified service priority areas. And we are also saying that the department reserves the right not to consider service providers programs that are not within targeted priority areas or deprived wards and not within department's priorities, as well as programs. In concluding, Honorable Chair, I just want to, there is a notion that is growing that there are anti-NPO sentiments in Gauteng. And I think we wanted to give this presentation to demonstrate that comparatively, Gauteng DSD has been in the forefront in as far as availing resources for NPO is concerned. There is also a notion that the IRP will collapse the NPO sector. If it was our view that we don't want to partner with NPOs anymore, we would not have issued the advert which guides NPOs on areas that the department is going to be funding. So there is no intention to collapse the NPO sector, neither is there an intention to collapse services. But we have to make sure that the state takes accountability in the delivery of constitutionally mandated services. And then the department will then contract NPOs in areas where such capacity does not exist in the state. So as I have already said, in the previous year and many other years, we have funded NPOs for occupational health and safety. We have procured vehicles just this year, as I said, over 200 vehicles were procured for NPOs. We have provided cell phones to NPOs, particularly on critical programs. This year, we have procured laptops for NPOs. We have increased our budget annually by 17.7% when other provinces were increasing at -2%. We also, as I've said, intend to strengthen services that are rendered by NPOs, particularly on residential care facilities, but also because of what the NPOs were complaining about, particularly for residential care, Honorable Chair, we actually reviewed the funding from being quarterly to 6 monthly for residential care facilities so that we create stability in the flow of finances in those facilities. But NPOs will continue to play a major role in identifying social problems, in finding solutions, and even in achieving social objectives in a variety of areas that public administration cannot cover efficiently or not at all. But it must be understood that NGOs and public administration are complementary, and NGOs do not represent an alternative of public administration. However, at present moment, the role of NPOs has been elevated to the extent that in some instances, not in all instances, in some instances, they border on replacing or serving as an alternative to state on critical service delivery areas, including what I said about adoption services. So the current partnership model is unsustainable as it is based on principles of over-reliance, and more resources therefore allocated to NPOs at the expense of a developed state capacity. So we will continue to work with NPOs, but the model is being realigned to ensure that we create a balance in terms of state responsibility and NPO responsibility. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair.
Thank you very much, DDG Kavasia. Thank you for the presentation. And I think we note the presentation. We are not going to engage this presentation at this stage because when we first learned about this new approach by the department, we did not have an opportunity as the portfolio committee to engage with it. That's why I actually sneaked in the request for this presentation to be made at this level. So we hope that we will have an opportunity as the portfolio committee in the near future to properly engage with yourselves in terms of this presentation. So today I'm not going to allow that. It's just for noting. And I hope that you also would have had a session with the NPO so that they too understand where the department comes from. I know you've done your risk assessments and all that, but I don't know to what extent does the NPO sector know where you are coming from and where you want to go. So I think it will be a continuous engagement with the NPO sector as well as the portfolio committee. So thank you very much for the update. On that note, I think we have come to the conclusion of our engagements, and I will allow Honorable Ledwaba to present the vote of thanks on behalf of the portfolio committee and assure honorable members and hope that we will get an opportunity for further engagement because they are seeing the presentation for the first time. They should be able to also apply their minds on the new developments. So thank you very much. Over to you, Honorable Ledwaba. I'm not taking hands, Mama.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thanks for affording me the opportunity to really thank everybody that is in this session. Let me start by acknowledging MEC Hlophe and thank you for your deliberations. And you have been, this session has been graced by yourself. Thank you very much for your presence. Thanking the committee led by the chairperson, Mary Filwe Kekana. I also want to say thanks for the hard work for raised the bar in this department, even if you will no longer be with this committee. We know that where you are going, you'll do exactly what you're supposed to do, and we wish you well. Honorable members of this committee, thank you once more for the diligent work and support that you offer for this committee. I know that other members are virtually, but thank you as well and continue the good work. I also want to thank the department, Ntate Basia, Lemmem Shongo, and all the staff members of this department. We are here and it shows that the department is at work. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been here. And thank you for the deliberations and the presentations that were made. Thank you very much. We all know that this department have been doing very well for ages and continue doing the good work. When people are busy, there will always be mistakes. And thank you for all those things that you alluded to. And it's good that you are here to come and listen and keep us awake so that we must not sleep at work. Thank you very much. We also have our staff members, the supporting staff that always supports this committee in the department led by Ntate Sipho Ngwala. Thank you so much and keep up the good work. You always be there when you are needed. You provide your services at all costs. Thank you so much. And we also have the team handset. Thank you for providing us with your services that we must be able to hear when we deliberate. At all times, you definitely avail yourselves. And also thank our VVIPs that are in this house, our stakeholders. Wherever we are as a department. You make us, stay awake for us to listen and do what we're supposed to do. And thank you for availing yourselves. And thank you for the services and the partnership that we have within us and yourselves. As you'll be going home, you must always, networking is very paramount, that I was going to say to the department as I will be concluding, that you have everything, whatever it takes to assist, but the only thing that we lack is dissemination of information for our stakeholders. Maybe if you can provide us, provide the stakeholders with the information, enough of it, so that they must know where to go and what to do when there is a great need in their respective areas. In conclusion, I wish you traveling mercies. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Ledwaba, for the vote of thanks. And happy, but I will do that. Thank you, and thank you very much, all of you, stakeholders, the department, HOD, DDG, Brasoli, Yvonne, everybody, CFO, we work very well together. MEC, thank you very much. And welcome once again to the department. I'm sure you've got a formidable team in the team, social development. I'm sure you might have realized that already. Very hardworking team. So we're looking forward to working with you on the other end in the agriculture sector in hope that we will find synergy in continuing with our good work. The meeting is concluded and you are all invited for lunch. And Mama, I think you wanted to raise something. You can speak to DDG directly, ne? Yeah, just talk to the DDG and you can ask whatever you wanted to ask. Thank you very much. Ke a leboga le itsamaele ka khutso and enjoy your lunch.